guys, it's Win Allen here of Win's Wheels, back for another episode of Mountain Bike Action's Tech Tip video series.
Welcome back. On today's Tech Tip, we're going to cover some of the issues that happen with Tubeless and some of the troubleshooting you can do, as well as applying fresh tubeless tape to your wheel. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to want to look at if you're having air loss issues is going to be your valve core. What will happen over time is that the valve core will start to build up sealant in there and stay open. So we're going to go ahead and take our valve core remover, take out our core, and then we're going to inspect the core. So what you're looking for is any kind of buildup here at the base of the valve core. And what will happen is this will start to pack in with sealant, and this little rubber seal here, the black seal, won't be able to do its job, which is to keep the air pressure inside the tire. So this looks good. Let's keep going and see if we can take a look at the rim strip and see what that looks like. We're going to remove our tire just like we would if we had a flat or we're changing tires. Okay, we're going to set the tire aside. Do is take a shop towel now, and we're going to get all the wet sealant or any dried up sealant that's accumulated on here and really get us a good look at what's going on inside. And I can tell you right now, one of the big issues is going to be that this person or their shop use Gorilla Tape. And the big issue with Gorilla Tape is it's porous. And for tubeless to work properly, you need a non-porous tape. So pretty much all the wheel manufacturers, whether it's DT or Stans or Reynolds or Specialized, Envy now, have all gone to a non-porous tape. And I can show you right here, this is part of, besides the tape being porous, but you start to get these buildups or these lips here where the tape overlaps, and what that actually is the air slipping past the end of the tape, and the sealant is trying to seal this up just like it would a hole in the tire or anywhere else. So that's a good indication, in addition to it not being the proper tape, that we need to change out the rim tape on this. Now that we have that old tape nice and dry, we're going to come into where the valve is. And there's a nut on here, and it should not be any more than hand tight. A lot of people think you need to put pliers on this to get the air to stop leaking. It's not the case. The air will leak at the valve usually because it's the path of least resistance, but it's typically not the valve itself that's leaking. And what happens over time of over tightening the valve is it will start to actually act like a cookie cutter and start to cut away at this rubber that's actually doing your sealing, the black there. There's a big gob on there, or it's not a nice smooth surface, it's not going to seal properly. So you just have to kind of scratch at it with your nail. Sometimes you can take your shop towel and just get off any of the raised parts on there. All right, we'll set that aside for now. Now we're going to go to this lip here where we saw the end of the tape had actually started coming up, and the sealant was trying to repair that air leak, which is what it's designed to do. So peel this back. Try to get it off in one piece if you can. And what you'll see on wheels that have had tape that is porous, like a Gorilla Tape, is they'll actually be wet on the inside here where it's actually weeped through, or at the spoke nipple holes, you'll actually see a buildup of sealant because that's typically where it gets pressed through. This looks like it was done not too long ago, so it hasn't had those kind of buildup issues. But when you're removing, especially stuff like Gorilla Tape that has great adhesive, you want to go slow, because if you just yank on it, you're going to be left with a lot of this buildup of glue here, and it's just time consuming to get off, and it has to come off to get the proper tubeless tape to seat. All right, so we're going to put this into the truing stand and make it a little bit easier getting this rim prepped properly. If you're doing this at home and you don't have a truing stand, putting the wheel back in your bike, if you have a work stand to put it in, will make it a lot easier than trying to wrestle the wheel when you're doing these different processes here. So what I'm going to do is take a shop towel, preferably a lint-free, because like I said, anything that gets between the rim and the tape doesn't allow the tape to fully adhere. You need to check with the rim manufacturer, but most rims today can handle acetone, and the advantage of using acetone is it's a little more aggressive than rubbing alcohol, and it will pull any kind of oils, tape, sealant, anything that could be on here that could affect the quality of an airtight fit. And we got these, I'm pulling a little too fast here. We got this little buildup here. We hit this, it comes right off. Just work our way around. We also want to make sure where the tire bead's going to sit. You can see we've got some old tape buildup in there. We're going to want to make sure we get that out as well. You can take a small flat-bladed screwdriver. Just do not be aggressive. Just gently work that out of the rim. Really no force being applied here, but it definitely speeds up the process than trying to get your shop towel in there. So I'm happy with the nice clean finish we have here. What I like to do when I'm gonna tape is, a lot of the rim manufacturers will post online their recommendations as far as tape width goes, but you can also take a pair of calipers and measure the inter width of the rim here. So we're coming up with almost 30.5 millimeters. So what I would do in this case is round up. The next tape width is 33 millimeters, because what's going to happen is, you notice this rim is concaved in the center, so that will actually eat up some of the width of the tape. So we want to make sure we have full coverage, bead to bead coverage on this. So if there's a question, I always round up versus going down. All right, so we have our 33 millimeter tape. I like to start opposite the valve. So we find our valve hole. It's here. We're going to start opposite the valve, and you'll see the seam of the rim is right here. I try to avoid starting or stopping on a seam, so we'll just come up to the next open spot here where it's nice and flat, smooth. Again, the cleanliness of your area is vital to this sticking, and the less you actually touch the adhesive on the tape, the better it will stick as well. So we're going to lie this down inside. You can actually see, so this tape is technically wider than the gap from bead to bead, but it's laying in there absolutely perfect because of that dip in the rim that eats up some of the width. So that's why we want to make sure we round up instead of down. As we're applying the tape, we're pulling with moderate force and then smoothing out and pressing the tape into the rim. Again, getting the tape smooth and down flat is going to be vital to making this airtight. And with low pressure, be it mountain bikes, you only need to go around one full time with about a 6-inch overlap. If you're doing road or gravel, I do 2 complete because the air pressure is higher and lower volume. I have a nice sharp pair of scissors. and cut that off after you have about a 6-inch overlap. Pressing that overlap down nice and firmly. All right, now we've got our tape down nice and flat, pressed into the rim real nice. What I like to do for getting the hole back for the valve is to actually melt the hole instead of pushing with a pick or a sharp implement, because what can happen is this tape can actually split. It has very little give to it, so actually melting the hole will assure that you don't split the tape. You have a nail, a pick, any kind of tapered object that you can heat up. Okay, now that that's good and warm, I want to make sure we locate our hole. It'll come from the inside and actually just melt that hole. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of elongate it ever so slightly. But by doing it that way, there's no chance of the tape splitting. I like to reinstall the valve core because it gives more of a taper as we're going through. Again, less chance of causing any kind of splitting or tearing. Now that the valve's through, we're going to reinstall the nut and apply moderate pressure with our thumb, pushing the valve into the tape and the rim, and then threading down the nut just until there's no more compression. That can be done with just finger pressure. Again, do not put pliers on these. It's way too much force, plus there's a high probability you're going to scratch your rim when you do that. All right, it is time to reinstall the tire. And there's a couple ways we can deal with sealant. One is if you had an adequate amount of sealant in your tire and you were able to save it, then there's no need to add any more. This, we're a little low on sealant, so we will be topping off the sealant. You're going to want to check for direction. There's usually an arrow on the tire. And then I always like to find the manufacturer's hot patch where it has their name and apply that area to the valve and try to get that centered. It does a couple things. One, it keeps it looking pro. Two, if you have to go back and you need a reference of where something may have occurred, you know that the tire was centered over the valve and gives you a way to, a reference point, if you will. Okay, so work this tire back on. Once you get one side of the tire on, you can decide whether you choose to use a cup and pour in your sealant, or use the syringe method through the valve. I tend to like the syringe through the valve because it keeps the mess to a minimum. You're not trying to put on the other side of the tire while you have all this sealant sloshing around. Just keeps it clean. And really through this process, you don't want to be using tire levers. Some downhill tires and rim combinations can be extremely difficult, but you chance damaging that tape in there. If you do that, you've got to start all over again. All right, so just clean this up as we go here. And then you get one side on. I like to start the second side opposite the valve and finish at the valve, because what that does is it buys you the most amount of real estate inside. You're not trying to work around that valve. It just tends to make life a little bit smoother. See how easy that went on? There really is no need for using tire levers to install this. Now, what I do like to do is pull the valve core out and inflate the tire, because what this does is it opens up the passage for the air and gives you the maximum amount of volume going in. When you try to do it around the valve core, what will happen is the air has to get past that. It can't push the same volume or pressure, and it can make it more difficult to actually get a tire seated. So You can use a floor pump, you can use an air compressor, but once you get that core out, it really opens up the ease of seating that. You can even, on ones that are really hard and you got to really dump a lot of air in there with a compressor, if you have a rubber tip on your blowgun, you just press that right up against there with no valve core, no issue, and you just slowly start to inflate. You don't want to dump a whole lot in there at once, and you'll start to hear the tire seat into the rim. Always making sure to never exceed the maximum tire pressure for either the rim or the tire, which should be printed on both. Alright, so the tire is seated. Now, at this point, we still need to get sealant in there. So what I'll do is I'll cover this up, let the air back out. But what this does is keeps the tire bead locked in, so when you're installing the sealant, it's not going to slosh or spill out when you're installing it through the valve. Just for ease of demo here, I'm going to put it back in the truing stand. You can put it back in the bike at this point. Just make sure there's nothing touching the bottom of the tire pushing up, because that could break the bead loose. Alright, so for this tire, and it's going to vary on widths of tire, this tire is going to take 50 milliliters or 50 cc's of tire sealant. Doesn't matter the brand, make sure you shake your tire sealant well. The solid particulates that are in there will settle at the bottom, and you won't get the full effect of the sealant if you don't shake it up just before installing it. So let's give that a nice shake there. I have my syringe with the tube on. I know that this one is 50 cc's when it's completely full. So we're going to go ahead and slowly fill our syringe. As soon as you're done, put the cap back on, because inevitably that'll get knocked over and make a big mess. And if you rotate this up, you'll actually get air bubbles, and that'll help speed up getting the sealant inside. Look inside, make sure your syringe is empty. At this point, I would grab a shop towel again, disconnect the hose, wipe off the immediate area there around the valve, and then we're going to reinstall our valve core. Valve cores are another thing that people really feel they need to really crank on. There's a reason why this tool is this size. It's so you can't get any leverage on it, so you can't over tighten or strip anything out. You're tightening against a little rubber gasket, and your hand is much stronger than that gasket is. All right, we're going to open up our valve, get our pump, or in our case, a compressor, and we're going to inflate this to about 40 psi is where I like to put them, and let them sit. And that way, we know if we have any kind of air loss or any trouble. If you have a problematic tire as far as it not sealing, one of the good ways to help distribute the sealant, you can shake it and you can roll it like it's a big steering wheel. The one I found that seems to really work the best is to bounce on the ground. If you bounce this around, what it does is it flexes the casing, it splashes it around. It's really simulating riding the bike. Riding the bike is the best, but there isn't always time to do that. So just giving this a few bounces, and as you're bouncing it, you're kind of just spinning the wheel. Do that a few times. You're going to want to go back and check and see if there's any kind of air bubbles or anything, any air escaping or sealant escaping between the rim and the bead. Check both sides. And then What I would do, just let it sit for maybe 30 minutes or so. Close your valve, let it sit. Come back and check your tire pressure and see if you've had any air loss. Losing, 1 to 5 psi, not a big deal. If you're getting a major drop of 10 psi or more, then you're going to need to investigate where that air is escaping from. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone for stopping by the shop. I really appreciate it. If you want to catch up to the videos we've shot before, hit the link below. You want to see what's coming in the future? Hit subscribe. I'm going to get back to doing what I do best, and that's wrenching. See you next time.